I'm sorry, my voice is not very good. I have some flu, but I don't have COVID. They test me every week twice. I tested yesterday, I'm fine. The chairperson, no, I will start with the Mrs. Mutebile and the entire family of Professor Emmanuel Tumusiime Mutebile. I'm very honored to have you here this morning. The Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, my good friend, Dr. Tingego Michael, the Chairperson of Makerere University Council, and your council, the Vice Chancellor of Makerere and your team, all of the principals of the colleges of Makerere University, and all of the professors of Makerere, many of whom taught me, and I'm glad to see you. I can see all of them here. Professor Bale Edward, that one taught me from secondary school. Dr. Mutenyo, Dr. Tom, of course, not forgetting Professor Isali. All of those were my teachers from year one, and many others, I'm sure, they're all over the place. The entire university fraternity, the students, all of the alumni of this great institution, and I'm sure friends of Professor Emmanuel Tumusiime Mutebile. All of the protocols are observed. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. What an immense pleasure to return to this intellectual powerhouse to honor one of the greatest economists and reformers of our time, and also to talk about a little bit the economic recovery efforts that the government of Uganda and its partners are trying to spearhead. On behalf of the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, and specifically the hundreds of fellow alumni of this great institution working in the ministry, I'm delighted to congratulate Makerere upon reaching 100 years of building for the future. Makerere, as we all know, is one of the world's most prestigious universities. Its alumni include world leaders, top-notch intellectuals, leading business executives, and many other impactful human beings, both living and dead. I thank you very heartily, the Vice Chancellor and your team, for inviting me and enabling me to return to Makerere for the first time as Secretary to the Treasury of the Republic of Uganda. I started my journey of training as an economist, as they have told you here. There are a number of things I am scheduled to do, even today, but I honestly can't think of one that would make me happy and proud than one of promoting economics. and those who have promoted it before. Until recently, my life's work, my teaching, my research, my public writing, my community work, and my Twitter and Facebook posts have all been about trying to demonstrate to fellow Ugandans what I learned while I was in the gates of Makerere, and that is that economics is not common sense per se. This public lecture is about 3 areas I'm going to talk about. The first one is the main challenges we are currently addressing to recover the economy from the pandemic which has battered it, as well as other shocks which have come in the recent months. Number 2, the roles that institutions of higher learning like Makerere may play to catalyze this recovery. But most importantly, talking about the gigantic legacy of the late Emmanuel Tumusiime Mutebile, arguably the grandfather of the economy we have today of Uganda. I will not belabor to explain the extent to which COVID-19 has impacted us. In any case, the entire world has been a laboratory and us all the specimen for its torment. From the anguish of losing our loved ones, I checked last night that the total world loss to COVID has hit 6.23 million people. 6 million people have died, plus 230,000. These are human beings dead in 2 years. It's not money, you know. When we say 6 million, some people say 6 million, okay. I don't know whether you have ever seen 1 million people in one place. But we are talking of 6 million people dead, and of these, 3,597 were Ugandans. And COVID has also disrupted our recovery, has made the inflation higher, as I'm going to elaborate, and the pandemic also has plagued the human race in so many ways that we all know. At its peak, the global economic growth declined to minus 3.1% in 2020, from 2.9% growth in 2019. To grow in minus terms means instead of the economy expanding, it was shrinking. In Uganda's case, economic activity was cut by more than half. The services sector was the most affected, in particular education, transport, hospitality, and entertainment activities. These were totally closed down. The size of the labor force has declined, with many workers moving from the modern and semi-modern sectors into subsistence agriculture. For the first time in a long time in Uganda, we have had urban-rural migration. People used to come from rural to urban. In the past 2 years, people have been leaving the cities to the villages. The share of the working persons in subsistence agriculture has increased from 41% to 52% before and after the outbreak of the pandemic. As we talk now, 6.8 million Ugandans housed in 3.5 million households are in subsistence economy. Already the university secretary has told you that revenue shortfalls hit us. We expected this financial year to collect 22 trillion shillings. We are likely to collect about 20 trillion plus some few billions. So already half year or about 8 months, we registered a shortfall of 1 trillion and 26 billion shillings. Yet, COVID-19 brought increased expenditure needs. We had to spend money to keep Ugandans alive. In the Ministry of Health, we have had to spend an extra 1.2 trillion so that we can keep Ugandans alive. And I should say, we have succeeded to a great extent to keep the people alive. And also in security. Some of you have heard that we have spent a lot of money in security, not for any other reason, but to enforce the SOPs so that Ugandans can keep away from the danger of this virus. I will now turn briefly to a topic which Ugandans have been debating a lot, commodity prices. Economists know that it takes time for external shocks to manifest themselves. In this case, they have started with the prices for essential items, particularly laundry bar soap, fuel, cooking oil, building materials like cement and steel, some food items, as well as education services. These have significantly increased in recent months, their prices. As a result, inflation has risen to 3.7% in March 2022, as the Deputy Governor already told you. I will later elaborate why the current events, with Ugandans feeling that the inflation of 3.7% is unbearable, is perhaps one of the key ingredients in the late Mutebile's monumental legacy. Because by the time he took the office that I occupy now, inflation in Uganda was galloping in a triple digits. In 1986, December, the inflation of Uganda was registered at 358%. I know that sounds very ridiculous. We know 100% is the highest, but the inflation of Uganda was at 358% in December. Meaning that prices were more than doubling every single year. Recently, in 2011, inflation peaked at around 35%. But in the months when it started around June of 2011, accelerating at around 11, 12, 15%, Ugandans started what they call walk to work. You remember? People were walking to work, led by, of course, politicians and other mobilizers. They mobilized the Ugandans, let us protest against this high inflation. I was a teacher at MUBS. I used to tell my students that had Ugandans lived in the 1970s, because by the time Idi Amin left in 1979, inflation was above 200, about 214%, and also lived in the 1980s, as I've told you, 358% in December of 1986. If some of those who were walking were there, they wouldn't have walked to work, they would have run to work. So the fact that Ugandans feel the pinch of 3.7% inflation today, it shows you the kind of work people like the great man Emmanuel Tumusiime Mutebile have done for this country. The causes of the current price increase are largely external and supply side related, key of which is the effect of COVID-19 restrictions, which disrupted supply chains worldwide, leading to higher transport costs, leading to shortage of shipping containers, leading to shortage of raw materials, and higher fuel prices. The inflation is logistical in nature. This cocktail has curtailed smooth manufacturing and production, as well as movement of goods and services, leading to increased commodity prices. In addition, the full opening of economies globally after COVID had lessened has led to a swift rise in aggregate demand for a number of goods and services, such as fuel. When they opened us up, we went to the filling stations to fill our tanks. And yet, I've told you on the supply side, these companies are constrained in the amounts of fuel they can move around the world because of the same challenges of COVID. And with the demand rising, with the constrained supply, prices usually rise. Also, we've had the swift demand in transport. As people reopened, we demanded more transport services. The taxis and the buses, which used to carry half, now they had to go back to full board. That is increased demand for transport services. Education services have also been demanded in higher levels. Right now we are grappling at government with the challenge of absorbing so many children of Uganda who have come back to school when some schools have closed business because of COVID. Some of the private schools could not reopen. So those children have gone to the few schools which stayed open. And this has led to increased demand of education services. And some of these schools, since they are operating in a liberal environment, which also I will emphasize a bit later, they increase the fees. So as a result of those factors I'm talking about, we have seen prices increasing. And since crises or shocks are like taxis, another one is often on the way as one leaves the stage, the Russia-Ukraine conflict emerged as COVID left the stage and has further disrupted the supply of goods such as oil, wheat, maize, and sunflower, as well as raw materials, which are so critical for manufacturing. The two countries are major producers and exporters of these goods, and this has further increased the challenges that we already had. What is government doing? Please note that the causes of the current spike in prices are: number one, supply related; number two, external; number three, global. They are affecting the entire world. Government policy response, therefore, must focus on addressing the supply constraints, most of which are external, as I have said, and affecting the entire world. Anything else implemented would be a wrong medicine to a known ailment. Therefore, as government, we are concentrating on the following: Number one, ensuring that we maintain a competitive environment so that we can support a continuous supply of the goods and services whose stream is currently constrained, i.e. fuel, soap, cooking oil, cement, steel, and others I've mentioned. And in this, we want to avoid creating more shortages. We cannot afford to make a demand outstrip supply. So in whatever you are thinking government could do, please make sure that your proposal does not make a demand exceed supply. Most of the things some people want us to do are good common sense, but very bad economics. Supporting farmers to grow more food is also on our cards. We want to support farmers to grow more food to ensure that we do not suffer food shortages. Why? Because food is the main driver of Uganda's inflation. If the prices, as we have seen them for soap, for cooking oil, were rising in areas of staple food for Ugandans, the situation would have been very different today. We are a bit having some breathing space because Uganda now has food, and not by mistake, by government policy. We are also facilitating more exports to take advantage of the shocks. Those ones I've mentioned. So we want to take advantage of these external shocks instead of them taking advantage of us. So we shall support further people who are going to export those various commodities that we export so that they can earn more foreign exchange for us to pay for the few expensive imports. I also wanted, as I was writing this, to ask myself, what would Mutebile have done if he was the one in charge, as he was some years ago? And this brings me now to the gigantic legacy of the late Emmanuel Tumusiime Mutebile, whom I have severally, and I repeat, referred to as the grandfather. To keep that economics doesn't work. And Mutebile taught us that lesson. Beginning in 1966, the state of Uganda had assumed the lead in all the major economic activities. The leaders then, and the people of Uganda, thought this was the best way of ensuring that the economy works for everyone. That when you get the state to tell suppliers of fuel that this is the price you should sell at, don't exceed 4,000 shillings a litre, that's the best way you have the interests of the people of Uganda. I'm going to tell you what happened. In 1969, in a bid to enable indigenous Ugandans to have a say in economic affairs of their country, which at the time was dominated by Asians and British immigrants, and for the realization of the real meaning of independence, President Obote announced a move to the left, culminating into the infamous 1970 Common Man's Charter. I'm speaking a lot of history for the kind of audience I have, because I'm deliberate. I would want you to know where Uganda has come from. That's when you will know where Uganda is now, and where Uganda is going, and how we should get there. This was the beginning of the control model in Uganda, 1969. When Idi Amin took power in 1971, economics was replaced by flawed common sense. As we heard in the numerous eulogies by his contemporaries of Professor Emmanuel Mutebile, Mutebile took the risk to remind the brash and those who were unappraised, like Idi Amin, how economics works. And for this, he paid a very huge price for reminding them how economics should work. Yet many Ugandans then considered him a nationalist. Even today, many Ugandans silently support Amin's expulsion and expropriation of Asian property, Amin's price and foreign exchange controls, and many other economic distortions. Generations of my students, none of whom was born by 1972, when Amin executed the economic war. And by the way, neither I was born then. I was born in May of 1978, when Amin was about to leave. As well as various groups of people, I have taught Uganda's economic history during my sojourns around the country. They have often expressed support and silent admiration of Amin's nationalist credentials. A younger Mutebile was conscious enough to comprehend Amin's economic distortions and human rights violations and risked to oppose them. Yet, like many budding economists of the time, Mutebile started as a socialist. He quickly mutated into a liberal thinker and went on to help Uganda to get rid of these economic distortions. The economic distortions Mutebile helped Uganda to get rid of include the following. Number one, Mutebile helped this country to get rid of price controls. These controls had resulted into emergence of black markets, popularly known as magendo, involving hoarding of basic groceries and other essential commodities. Today, if we carried out a referendum on television, on radio, and we asked Ugandans, what should Ramathan do on the prices of cooking oil, soap? And one of the politicians in Parliament, as I've been interacting with them, proposes that let us fix the price of cooking oil a litre at 2,000 and a bar of soap at 2,000 and so on. Many Ugandans would say, Ramathan, you are the man. Now you are working. That is terrible economics. It would create demand rise and outstrip supply. Because even if you go and try to supply the soap to produce it as a government, the people would buy more because now they can afford to buy more. You know, those days, because now Amin controlled the price and other subsequent governments, people would listen to the budget religiously. As they were reading the budget, everybody had a radio on the ears, waiting for the list of prices. The ministers of finance, after reading the budget, would read the list of prices. The following are the prices. Soap, this. Huh? Honorable Minister, are you the one who produces the things you are reading? Is it your money that is being used to produce those items? If you are not the one producing them, why are you determining the price? So what the sellers used to do was to remove the goods from the shops and keep them. somewhere. They hide them. Whoever wants to buy soap, you go to the outlet, and everywhere they tell you we don't have soap. But as you are going back, you know, very disappointed, some young person comes after you. What are you looking for, sir? I want soap. There's no soap in this town. Come, we have some at home. They take you and they sell you a bar at some price which should have been the market price. Who's that younger person taking you? Is the daughter of the other soap attendant who told you there is no soap in the country. That's what we call magendo. We no longer have that in Uganda, and we shall not have it again. Secondly, Mutebile kicked smuggling out of Uganda. The few smugglers you see today have a DNA of smuggling. They are grandchildren of those people who were smuggling in the 70s. What brought smuggling to Uganda? Due to economic mismanagement, the past governments were unable to collect enough tax revenue to finance government expenditures. To deal with this challenge, the governments resorted to levying exorbitant import tariffs to raise revenue. The high tariffs forced traders to engage in smuggling, never to pass via the official inlets. Malaba, Busia, Mutukula, no. People got panya to bring in goods. Why? Because Amin had put 100% tax on cigarettes, on alcohol. People want to drink alcohol, 100% tax. So they could come and use panya to bring in the goods. When Mutebile took charge of the economy, he said the tax policy must be prudent. Tax Ugandans at rates which they can afford to pay. And that's what we are doing up to now. I'm telling you, and I repeat, those who are still smuggling have to be checked, have a DNA of smuggling. The third thing Mutebile did is that he helped Uganda to stop printing money to finance budget deficits. Bank of Uganda had been turned into a printing press of money. Consequently, inflation had galloped into triple digits. From Idi Amin through to the governments, that cocktail of governments which ruled Uganda for about 1.5 years, 1980, to Obote II, to the first few years of the current government, Uganda was printing money. And Mutebile told them this economics does not work. You don't just go to the printing press and churn out cash. You have to earn the money as a government. And we said bye-bye to printing money. That's what we call monetary discipline. Mutebile also saved Uganda from black markets. These used to emerge as a result of fixed exchange rates. For example, the official exchange rate in 1986 was fixed at Uganda shillings 14 shillings and 50 shillings per US dollar for essential and non-essential imports, respectively. They used to have a dual exchange rate system, 2 windows. You are going to import essential goods like a fuel, go to window 1. Access the dollar cheaply. You are going to bring some luxuries like cosmetics, perfumes, go to window 2. Now, those who are going to bring fuel, they used to buy $1 at 14 shillings. Those who are going to bring alcohol, 50 shillings $1. Now, this is what younger people see on paper, and they say, how I wish we could live in the Uganda like this one, where exchange rate was low. That exchange rate was artificial. It used to cause problems. Fixing the exchange rate led to shortage of foreign exchange and emergence of black markets, which used to be called the Chibanda market for foreign currencies. As a result of that, international trade was severely affected, leading to a shortage of imported goods and services. Uganda had rampant shortages of imports. These things we take for granted today, where goods are poured all over the roads, the roadsides, and you are shopping, flat irons, electric kettles, refrigerators on the roadside. It's not by mistake or by good omen. It's because of good economics. Ask your parents. My mom told me she bought a kettle, electric kettle. To buy it, she had to get a friend who was traveling to Dubai. You give them money to buy your kettle, because there was no foreign exchange to bring those goods. They used to first write a cheat. You write a cheat to the deputy governor to sell you some dollars to go. Today, these goods are being moved around. You know, hawkers now, they dress up in all sorts of goods. One of these days you'll wake up and somebody has a refrigerator on your doorsteps. Do you want a refrigerator? Why? Because those goods now can come in freely. There is a foreign exchange in Uganda. And those things we take for granted, they were because of the work which was done by these great people, like Emmanuel Tumusiime Mutebile and some other people he worked with. In addition, Mutebile helped Uganda to restore fiscal discipline. He re-established the discipline of government, maintaining a fiscal position that is consistent with macroeconomic stability and sustained economic growth. Government avoided excessive borrowing and debt accumulation, committed more spending of the national budget on productive activities in the economy. What today I hear Ugandans, and I feel it, and we are reforming ourselves fully. When Ugandans say, look at the debt levels, the debt numbers, I would want to tell you, as a person who sits in the treasury every day, Uganda is a very lucky country to have had people like Emmanuel Tumusiime Mutebile to put in place a framework in which some of us can come and fit in and be able to reform a few things, and the systems work perfectly. Uganda's debt levels will never get out of the sustainable levels because they are very well anchored on that discipline. It was also Mutebile who masterminded the merger of the Ministry of Finance with the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development in March 1992. My ministry I head today as the head of the technical team was not there before 92. There were two ministries. There was a Ministry of Finance and there was also a Ministry of Planning and Economic Development. Now, somebody may ask, merging them, is that also a big deal? Oh yeah. These two ministries had caused a very big challenge for Uganda, fiscal indiscipline, because of uncoordinated policy movements. Finance was responsible for collecting revenue and financing the budget. Economic planning and development was responsible for coming up with the plan and the budget. So the one who was planning and budgeting was not the one with the money. Already you can see the challenge which was there. Mutebile was at planning and economic development with Josh Mayanja Nkanji as his minister. And there were other group, I will not mention, at finance. And these guys could make a plan And the other guys are financing other things. They are saying, let us invest in agriculture, in roads, in energy, in this. The guys are buying cars. They are facilitating travel abroad. They are giving money to different sorts of people. That's what we call fiscal indiscipline. When the money does not speak to the plan. We are now fully realigning and ensuring that the budget is informed by the plan. And once it is informed by the plan, it must adhere to a cash budget discipline. If there is cash, let us spend it. If there is no cash, please wait. You will not die. Uganda will not end. And that's what we are going to be doing going forward in the memory of the late Mutebile. So this improved coordination of macroeconomic management helped Uganda to fight inflation. Inflation reduced from 54.5% in 1990 to 93 after the merger of the ministry to 5.1 the following financial year, 1993-94. Within 1 year, inflation had moved from double digits to the target. As a pioneer PSST, Mutebile implemented 3 basic principles. Number 1, prudence, ensuring that expenditure by government was in line with revenue and limiting borrowing strictly to necessary needs. When I went to finance, in the budget, which I had also participated as an outsider for some time analyzing, I knew where sometimes the problem comes from. And I've told my people in finance, and they have appreciated this, that it is wrong for us to call certain things expenditure pressures, that we have expenditure pressures. What does that terminology mean? Expenditure pressures. That because you are pressurized, you have to find money to spend on it. I said from today, we should have only expenditure needs. If something is not a need and you are convinced in your analysis, please tell me as Secretary of the Treasury. This one we could avoid it. And we should avoid it. And that is Mutebile who taught us that. Number 2, sustainability. No expenditure commitments that couldn't be sustained over the medium and longer term. That budget tokenism, because there are some people who want some money, you throw some money to them. We call them supplementary expenditures. You have heard about these debates. Slowly, it's going to be a marathon to get these things out of our faces, but I want to assure you we shall get there. Number 3 is consistency. All expenditures in line with the government's longer goal of building an independent, integrated, and self-sustaining economy. Those 3 principles guided Mr. Mutebile's PSST, and it is very good practice for us all. In addition, Mutebile jealously defended the independence and authority of Bank of Uganda when now he switched to the central bank. He defended its authority over monetary policy as anchored in the Bank of Uganda Act, regulation and supervision of banks as anchored in the Financial Institutions Act, and the performance of its functions without subjecting it to the direction or control of any person or authority, as the Constitution dictates. This transformed the bank into a credible institution with the prime objective of maintaining price stability. Mutebile led the crusade of private sector development to reduce government and its inefficiencies in doing business. I know when we are in these seats where we are, there are some controversial decisions we must take. They take time for people to understand them, especially when they start to see the fruits of those decisions. Mutebile was not very far away from these controversies. As you know, he initiated with his team the idea of privatizing state-owned enterprises, which had turned the treasury into their petty cash. They mismanage themselves, they go to the treasury to get money. Mutebile sold all of them. One time I remember we were in the main building there debating with Ali Mazului, Professor Ali Mazului. When they came out, I got the opportunity to see Mutebile briefly. I told him that, Governor, you really sold these companies. If you had gotten a buyer, you were about to sell government itself. And he had a very good laugh. And I want to tell you that many people don't appreciate, don't understand what this kind of hard decision he took with his colleagues meant for Uganda. Uganda today is stable. Uganda today is transforming very fast, partly and majorly because of that decision. You know, prior to privatization, government used to do everything. Government was the one running hotels. Imagine government laying beds in a hotel. Government was the one who producing cooking oil, soda, and so on. But as you know, government is a very bad business manager. But too, the people of Uganda never had a stake in the economy and in Uganda. That's why they were very willing then to cause trouble, and everybody packs their suitcase and they go to Nairobi on the next bus or plane that we have gone to exile. Today, no Uganda wants to leave this country. Why? Not because they love the country so much. No, it's economics. They have invested in the private sector. So when you see people in Kampala saying, okay, let us go and riot, the very people who report them to police are those ones they have been with in the meeting, planning the riot, where they will pass and so on. Because they have a stake there. Somebody has a shop where you're going to pass and throw stones. So he calls the police. Tomorrow we are going to riot. We shall pass here. That's what privatization did for Uganda. It secured Uganda. So these guys who had very incredible foresight. All of these reforms enabled Uganda recover and sustain growth at an impressive average annual rate of 6.5% per year, maintained single-digit inflation, averaging 5% for much of the period Mutebile was in charge at the Treasury and Bank of Uganda, and also facilitated poverty reduction from 56% in 1992 to 19.7% in 2014. However, with all of that huge legacy, we still have unfinished business. Mutebile left us with unfinished business. And this unfinished business is not all about maintaining his legacy, but also of propelling Uganda to the level that he wanted it to get at. In order to do this, we are going forward to concentrate much of our effort as well as resources to addressing the following. Number one, a large subsistence economy that has crippled household incomes and the purchasing power of the population. Ugandans have food, Ugandans look very beautiful, Ugandans look very healthy, but Ugandans are broke. We are broke because of the low level of economic transformation. We are working so hard just to survive. We are working so hard just to get the bare minimum. That's the unfinished business we are encountered with. How do we get people of Uganda out of this situation where they are working so hard for no money so that they can earn incomes? Two, high unemployment and underemployment of the younger people. We need to turn our growth into one which facilitates job creation. And we are working on this. I know some of my teachers here have done some research. They do some wonderful, the first paper I read about jobless growth was written by Professor Edward Bale. I think 2014 or something there. And over time, we have engaged in these conversations. I see Dr. Muhumuza here. By the way, Makerere University, some time back, a few years back, we were with the Dr. Muhumuza somewhere having a cup of tea. We said that since many other economists have decided to shy away from these aspects, let us be the only two economists in Uganda. So we started making noise about all these things, but very informed noise, informed by research. And one of those researches is about the ability to create jobs amidst growth. Our growth now, and particularly in the past, has been very fast and sustainable, but jobless. Number three, so that's the number two, unfinished business. Number three is the high cost of doing business. The cost of credit, the cost of electricity, and transport. These have lowered competitiveness of Ugandan products in the regional and international markets. Number four is the low investment in scientific research and development to inform innovation and policy. That's why the Professor Nawangwe was reminding me that money spent at Makerere is very well spent. You are preaching to the convert, sir. I know that. Because without R&D, we shall not turn this country into what we want. Countries are developed by innovation, by creative destruction, but not by repeating what you have been doing so much. You will not change anything. We are mindful of that, and we are working on it. Number five is the low level of industrialization, and this is critical. So many Ugandans have gotten stuck in agriculture. Agriculture does not transform a country. I want to repeat this. I've said it severally. Agriculture is good for producing food. But food is what? Food. That's all. And food has low income elasticity of demand. For those who know some economics, low income elasticity of demand means that as people earn more money, they don't spend more on a certain good. The proportion they spend on it is low. That's the food. I'm here, I've come back to Makerere where I was a student. Now I'm a secretary of the treasury. Do you think now I eat a sack of rice? No. I am still eating the rice I was eating when I was in Nkuruma. The amount is that. But I've bought more suits, I've bought more shoes, I've bought a new phone, I'm buying airtime. Those are the things which take my income now. They are all industrialized products, manufactured products. So if we want to turn around Uganda, we need to have more people employed in manufacturing and in modern services. And that's what we are trying to do when we tell you that let us break this comfort. Ugandans are so comfortable in low incomes, in poverty. We say, no, let us remain the way we are. We need to distort some of those comfort zones. Number 6, land ownership and security, land use and land fragmentation is another unfinished business. The way property rights are managed, it is something which I'm sure Mr. Mutebile would want to change, so that ownership over property is well defined and well protected. Land use changes. These idle lands we have all over the place in the city, people buy plots of land, they fence it with iron sheets for 20 years. In other countries, you pay tax to force you to develop the land or to sell it. That's how countries transform. But before that, we need also to ensure that all the people of Uganda have titles over their land which they own. That's how they will develop their land. Nobody will plant coffee if the land does not have security. They will plant Tumusiime and the beans, things they can quickly harvest. The high levels of corruption in government, but also in the private sector, is an unfinished business. People stealing government money for own enrichment. People stealing money from the companies they work for in the private sector. Some Ugandans ask, why are these foreigners employing fellow foreigners? Because when they employ a Ugandan as a cashier, within a week, the guy, because he has seen some many millions collected, he gets half of the millions and runs away. So corruption is both in the private sector and in the public sector, and it's something we must work on. How do we respond to corruption? Not by just talking about it, not by walking, that there is a corruption day we are going to walk. No, corruption is dealt with by improving systems, reducing human contact with money. Because imagine if you are the one, every day you have a heap of money at the back of your office to distribute to people. What happens? So we are investing now in the systems. Nobody now touches money. It goes through a system, because in the system it is traceable. If you deduct some, it will remain there in the audit trail. You picked some money. We get you. Procurement. We want procurement online. When I arrived in the Ministry of Finance, I said we must implement this. And we are implementing it. Starting next year, half of government votes are going to procure online. As we go on phasing it, by around 2024-25, no government entity is going to procure by sitting in a room. We should procure in the same way we are on a WhatsApp group. You know, in a WhatsApp group, when you are typing, everybody sees that you are typing. When you delete, it says there, Ramathan has deleted. Even the members ask, what have you deleted, Ramathan? So imagine if all goods in Uganda were purchased in such a forum. And that's where we are going now. We have also limited exports and export markets and finished business. And finally, the quality of health and education services. These are the 9 major things that we consider to be unfinished business that we are trying our level best as government to prioritize, but also to support the private sector to complement the government effort. Ladies and gentlemen, we may not remember everything I've talked about, but let's remember Mutebile for one thing. He taught us that through free exchange, difference becomes a blessing, not a curse. Through free exchange, difference becomes a blessing, not a curse. As a younger man, Mutebile grew up at a time when mercantilism, an economic practice by which governments used their economies to augment state power at the expense of other countries, and protectionism were the norm as opposed to exception. Mutebile knew that exchange is mutually beneficial. Nothing symbolizes this better than the double thank you at the marketplace. Have you ever realized that when we go to a market to buy something, you are going to buy meat, some beef. The person who slaughtered the animal, the fattest amongst all, first of all, as Adam Smith told us, is not just a good Samaritan, that he wants you to have good meat. No, he's serving self, his own interest. He wants to get the best meat so that he can outcompete other people, and he sells the best meat. But at the end, when you buy good meat and you pay your money there, in most cases, both of you say thank you to each other. As you hand the money to the man, says, thank you, customer. And you say, thank you for the meat, for the good meat. What has caused that? This difference between the supplier of the meat and you, the buyer, is very well anchored in economics. The economics of specialization. I'm saying this to allude to a fact that as a country we must also avoid the temptation of using trade policy to think that we are going to develop the country. It's a bad shortcut. To develop a country, we use industrial policy, not trade policy. Not to come and you say, Ramathan, increase the tariff on such and such a good because we want to stop it from coming. I would want to say that often economics works in such a way that mutual benefit, cooperation, and interdependence created around the market is the best way to go about life. In the market, we are genuinely thanking each other for having made each of us better off. And I would want us to take forth that spirit. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I want to ask a question. In all of this we have had, what role could higher education institutions play, like a Makerere? Apart from promoting greater productivity and work efficiency, education is the primary opportunity equalizer. We are all what we are because of education. There is no way I would have gotten anywhere near the treasury of Uganda if I didn't come to Makerere. And being taught by these great men seated here, and women. So since we know that education is the opportunity equalizer, probably the key to economic recovery now is in the ability of our universities to generate the kind of human resource that ultimately will translate into entrepreneurship and innovations. During the pandemic, Makerere played a role. They set up university scientific advisory committees and helped us to fight the pandemic. Universities need, now Mr. Vice Chancellor, Professor, and your team, please relax a bit on the requirements, both academic and financial, to take on more students and reduce the dropout rate, one of the effects of the pandemic. Please do everything not to leave any student behind, particularly those who belong to the most vulnerable socioeconomic backgrounds. You know you were setting me up, now I'm revenging. Remember, Professor, that families are going through a very difficult time, so develop timely student-centric responses to those needs. Universities should also play a role in economic and social planning. Enterprise incubators, startup support should be upscaled to boost local job creation and competitiveness of small businesses. As hosts of the country's younger generations, universities should think about practical ways of averting the growing boomerang generation. A boomerang generation, these are younger adults who return to their parents' home after university because they have failed to live on their own. What role are we playing as a university to change this? Because I've observed it's a very big challenge. People graduate from Freedom Square, throw the hats up there, but then in the evening they go back to their parents' home. As government, we commit to continue enhancing funding for universities to support the transformation of higher education in the face of these tectonic, longer-term shifts in demographics, technology, and competition. We shall invest more in online, hybrid, and competence-based learning, improved infrastructure. I went to my Lumumba and I committed. We are going to renovate Lumumba and Box. I had already been written to by the minister, the Honorable Minister of Education, and also the First Lady, called me like 5 times, please help Makerere. So I commit, we shall renovate the halls of residence and all those areas. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, very sorry for being long. I don't usually have long lectures, but it has been a long time coming to Makerere. The past 2 years, ladies and gentlemen, may have been a pain to each of us. The current increase in prices of essential goods at a time when we are emerging from a pandemic of unprecedented proportions may also be posing real threats to our survival. But on the horizon, I want to assure you, the future looks bright. As you can see, I'm a tall man, I see the future is very bright. These shocks are temporary. The situation will soon normalize, and we are taking care of it in the best way possible. A way based on economics, not common sense. Let's not listen to alarmists and those who bend the truth to turn flawed common sense into economics. Support the ongoing reforms to create an economy that works for everyone. Those who here be, seek ye the truth, build for the future of the great Makerere. A Makerere that molded all of us into who we are today, and I should say, may the soul of Professor Emmanuel Tumusiime Mutebile continue to rest in eternal peace. Thank you very much.